Hey everybody, as you're coming in, feel free to filter to the front, and if you're interested in asking questions, try to orient yourself near a microphone. We will. Questions from the audience, so be ready. Get to put our experts on blast. All right. I'll do a thumbs up maybe to AV when they're ready. Yeah? Cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Dawn Wages, she, her pronouns. I live in Philadelphia with my wife and 2 dogs, and I am honored to be hosting this session today. It is Fostering Better Communications with Scientific Community and CPython in core Python development. And really, it's not about me today. I'm going to be facilitating some of the questions that we prepped before this meeting, and then we will give hopefully nearly half the time for the audience to be able to ask questions. I would love for a couple of notes, if you could keep your phones quiet or off, if you can keep chattering to a minimum, and if you want to engage in conversations more, please reach out to our panelists in the hallway track. All right. I see people engaged, so let's jump in. I'm going to do a round robin to each of our panelists, and they will do about 60 seconds to tell us who they are. Do you want to start?
All right. Hi, I'm Mike Droettboom. I'm a CPython core developer, and I currently work at NVIDIA on CUDA Python.
Hi, I'm Carol Willing. I'm a learner, builder, and sharer, and I'm on the Python core team, former steering council, and also longtime open science person with Jupyter and Napari and other things.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Dekhtiar. I work at NVIDIA. My passion is packaging. I know I'm weird, but well, some people have to do it. And yeah, well, excited to be on the panel and participate.
Yeah, I'm Savannah Ostrowski. I'm a Python core developer. I am a current steering council member and the release manager for Python 3.16 and 3.17 coming up. I also work at Fast API Labs, working on our cloud product and a bunch of different stuff in the open source ecosystem.
Travis Oliphant, longtime Python sojourner. Spent a lot of time with the scientific Python community. I became a core Python developer for a little while, primarily during the NumPy development and SciPy development. And then for the past 20 years, I've been building businesses, helping open source connect with companies and learning that whole space. Currently, I'm CEO of Open Teams. I run a venture fund, and I am chair of Quantsite.
Awesome. Cool. You want to hold on to that. I only gave 60 seconds to these really laudable characters. We have them all on the stage because of their deep impact and investment over the years in different ways to both the core Python community and the scientific Python community. So I'm going to open up with a question, and feel free to give as much background as you'd like. We're going to do the same question for all 5, and then we'll get into more individual questions that are targeted to particular people. So what can we do? And let's start on this side. What can we do to bridge the gap between the scientific Python community and the core Python community?
Great question. A lot of maybe I'll save some of my conversation. Yes. We can listen. I would say like a lot. Recognize that Python is huge. We say Python community, but it's really a Python nation, a Python world. And no matter whatever you're involved with, which is really cool, I'm sure, there are 100 people doing really cool things that you don't even know about. And so just like listen, and then I think reach out to a thing, kind of ambassadorship. Like reach out, do something, and be brave. Be brave, empathetic, and kind.
Yeah, I think actually Deb Nicholson in her keynote or the session this morning kind of captured it. Like, I think there's a great opportunity for us to bring people along, not just like, solving the acute problem, but also teaching people how to fish and like helping people understand the problems that we're facing. Like scientific Python is a, deeply complex community. It's like a galaxy, and, just trying to help people understand the things that we face day to day.
I'll try to mention maybe something that I think had a tremendous impact on the scientific Python fairly recently. For me, the work that actually Travis started with the NumPy array API has immense impact and repercussion in the scientific ecosystem, we have all these tools that deal with vectors and arrays that are communicating, and if everybody implements their own standards, it gets very complicated to have NumPy working with CuPy, working with JAX and TensorFlow. I think, and Travis, accept the compliment, but this work of that QuantSight and yourself and other people like Ralph pioneered of pushing the array API forward, and in my opinion, has been an immense positive move for the scientific Python community. And I wish to see more of this interoperability moving forward.
So if I'm to understand, you're also you're talking about tool and system level interoperability. Awesome.
Yes.
Yep. Understood.
This is a hard one because it is as much about humans as it is about the technology. Back in probably 2014, I started contributing to IPython notebooks, joined the project, and watched the trajectory of Jupyter Notebooks, Jupyter Hub, Binder really take the world by storm. And at the same time, I was really interested in languages and core Python, and I had a background in processes and how people work. And I knew what pain I was going through coaching people how to even install Jupyter Notebooks, much less Jupyter Hub, and that's a whole nother thing. But what I noticed was a lot of the core team for core Python, while lovely humans, didn't have the context of what we do in scientific Python. And I think one of the things that's really hard and precious to all of us is time. And I think somebody else had said, listening is really important. I would say listening as well as trying not to assume, and also asking questions when you don't really understand the context, because we're all experts in our slice, but the slices all overlap and interconnect. And so to be productive, we need to sort of try not to anchor in our positions, but try to work towards and understand first and then solve.
Yeah, I think want to add to that a little bit in that not just that the Python community is so large, but even the core Python developer community at this point is so large that you really sort of go from like everybody can fit in a room and have two pizzas to like we have to start thinking hierarchically in a sense, or I don't want to sound too corporate, but like you have to find a way so that everybody doesn't have to know everything, right? So you can take off your little piece of it, take all your allies and other people who are also interested in that piece, go off, work for a while, make that improved, and synthesize that in a way that then everybody else can understand the very most important parts of it in order to make a global decision, but don't have to pay attention to the entire thing. I think that's a model that I sort of saw work with Faster CPython a bit. We would sort of go off on our own repo and kind of run forward with experiments pretty quickly and new ideas. And not all core developers had to pay attention to all of it, but when it got to that point, we would bring it back. And I know some things with Wheel Next also kind of followed that pattern. So like, that's just something I've found very effective.
Awesome. And
Maybe
so-
we can add something real quick. I thought Carol was jumping on it, so I didn't say it. But I think data is also super important. It was quite a realization for me when I saw the JetBrain survey that 48% of people are doing data science, which might surprise you because it did surprise me. It's actually the first community in Python. Data science is the biggest slice of the pie. It's surprising to me, but that reinforced that these topics are important.
Awesome. And so the first two questions, kind of introducing our panelists, and then also orienting how we can align the two communities, put some assumptions on the audience that you all know the difference between the work that's happening in core Python and the work that's happening in the scientific Python community. So if I could get a show of hands, please don't be shy. how many people feel like they understand what's happening or what is the boundaries of the scientific computing community? Okay, a few hands. So how about we start out with that question on what do we think the boundaries or the kind of description to an audience is of the scientific computing community? And I'll take a, right, yeah, it's a
Just
big
like
one.
a small
Right,
question.
small thing, but just kind of give a boundary or an assumption on how you could define it. And I'll go to whoever wants to be brave enough first.
I'll do it.
Yeah, awesome.
I'll do it. So I think the easiest way to understand what the scientific Python community is to look at two organizations, PyOpenSci and Scientific Python, because most of the people that are maintaining a Scientific Python package exist in one or both of those spaces, and the conversations tend to happen there, as well as conferences like SciPy, where there are smaller conferences where we get to have conversations, and the core team has been part of those conversations for a long time. But that's the way I would view it. Now, somewhat tangentially with data science is a funny thing because we noticed it even with Jupyter. It's not necessarily like science. It is used in science, but it's also used in business and many other domains. So the needs and in things that are important aren't necessarily universal across the board.
I guess I would say that I actually hope the boundaries get less clear over time. Like, I would love to see more cross-pollination and like bringing people in. Like, the reality is like CPython is an implementation of a spec, but like we also are driven, like when we make decisions on the steering council, we're thinking about end users. We're thinking about people and how they're going to, how a new feature is going to impact the way they work or the way that they write code. And so I think it's sort of inevitable that the influence of scientific Python, especially as that curve continues to accelerate, like that becomes more and more important. And I think coming back to like kind of what I said earlier, like we need to like bring these communities closer together. We need, I'm actually not a scientific Python person. I've done very little in like the NumPy space, et cetera. But like, I think trying to bridge that gap and trying to help people understand is like really, really important to the core work that's happening in core development.
I love that. And a part two to that question, feel free to keep the mic or pass it. Why is it important that we're having this conversation?
So I'll talk about that. This conversation is one, the reason I'm a Python user is because I'm a scientist first. And there was a cooperation between scientists and Python that existed when I showed up in 1997. And it was actually really interesting to see. Now, part of that is a smaller world, and like the whole Python ecosystem could be gathered in a room, potentially the core developers. But in that group, there were people like Conrad Hinson, Paul Dubois, people that did significant things like get complex numbers into the language. Guido didn't really care about complex numbers, but he allowed them in because Conrad Hinson cared. And because Conrad was there promoting them, they were in there. And I would never have touched Python if complex numbers weren't there. Right? So, and then extended slicing syntax was added. These things were added. Now, what's happened since is with a breadth of people coming to the table, it was very clear that the scientific crowd that was able to, because on the scientific crowd side as well, it's hard. You've got your brain full of all kinds of stuff you're thinking about. And you got to go, why do they care about that? What is this thing that they're worried about with a tree structure and it was hard. It was hard work, and probably some of the hardest work to go and engage with core Python developers and get them to understand why we cared about this thing. Especially got deeper, like the matrix multiply operator. The matrix multiply operator was an example that did not get added until someone like Nathaniel Smith spent hours and hours and weeks on stuff to make that happen. So it's really important because when you enable something to reach more people, then you can have a bigger impact. And then those bigger impact can come together in a shared space, and shared abstractions can be illuminated. So I just want to be a voice that says how critical it was for that cooperation to exist early on, and how that doesn't happen accidentally. And it happens because there's someone brave enough to step up and speak, and listen to what somebody doesn't understand them. And I see that over and over again. And we don't always do as great of a job, right? Because it's hard. It's hard work to be to care about something that you don't necessarily care about every day. And it takes work on both sides. It takes work for us on the scientific side. It takes work on the core Python side too. And when it happens, it's beautiful.
Anyone want to add? Why is this conversation important right now? Large communities, important projects that are on the forefront, what the industry is doing, perhaps?
But for me, I come from the compute side.
Okay.
So for me, when you say scientific Python, the first idea that come up to my mind is that getting the result is not good enough. It's also getting the result with before the heat death of the universe. So speed is a component that is pretty important. If you think about all the work that NumPy has been doing, they didn't invent mathematical operation that allowed you to do it fast. And NumPy is the proof that this matters. And today we have deep learning. And again, we didn't need Python to do deep learning. In fact, the first models were not implemented in Python. It's just that Python has such a nice interface, such a nice entry point, that people were like, oh, I want the performance of C and C++ and CUDA and all these things, but I want to do it in a simple way, the way that Python is doing it. And now we have all these JIT compilers that is even better. Remove all this complex code that I need to compile, just do it at runtime. And it's, for me, that's really what defines, in a sense, scientific Python, is answering scientific questions. And actually, I would kind of challenge what you said about data science not being science, because if you think about it, well, it's science applied to business, right? So it is, in my sense, science, but the point is not just getting the answer. It's also being able to predict the financial market before the financial market get there. If it takes you 5 days to get the weather forecast for tomorrow, well, it's not that useful anymore.
Interesting. Any more points on that question on this side? Okay. So we had a couple of mentions. Did I move on too fast? Okay. We had a couple of mentions of some pivotal projects, past, present, and maybe some future. I'd love for you all to maybe go through and spend as much time as you'd like talking about some projects that you've been a part of or have seen that meet the scientific Python community and the core Python community. And let's start on this side. That's okay.
Yeah, sure. So some of them got mentioned. I think they're what's interesting, I mean, I think just to frame the question a little bit, I think what's really interesting is how much gets done without needing core Python's permission, right? In a sense, it's like a testament to how flexible Python as a fundamental design has been, that people can just go in and start building something and they don't have to collaborate. Now, there are these places like the matrix multiply operator and the array API and things like that, where it is really important to kind of have it central so that everybody can start using it. I think it would be interesting to find ways in which Python could maybe become more generally extensible, and thinking of how let's build a tool that anybody could then come along and customize for their particular community. It would be a huge lift, but perhaps you could do generic operator overloading rather than having to have each one picked out. Obviously that's probably not feasible, but thinking like that. We're also we've been talking about we're building a JIT in Python, but wouldn't it also be super useful to just make it easier to hook anybody's JIT in, right? And so then the specific needs of a particular kind of JITting could be, more closely integrated into the language. So I think, the learning of some of these projects for me has been, how can we make those required less often in the future, right? How can we think more generically?
And I'd love to continue that framing for the rest of the questions as well. So I did ask maybe a level setting question on what are the projects, in case people may not be aware. But if you want, I think it's great to have what are the projects and what are the learnings from it. So that is why you're
sure.
bringing up the project. I love that.
Yeah.
So maybe we can continue that as if you have a project in mind, past, present, or potentially future, like where can we learn? What are we pulling away from that project? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that pulling too much on you? Yeah. You get the mic next, Carol. So what do you think?
I don't know that I would have framed it that way, but I want to go back to one of the reasons I came to the Python ecosystem probably, I don't know, now 12 years ago, is my mom was in late stage Alzheimer's. My kids were in high school. I had taken time off because I wanted to be with my family. Now, I also worked at a nonprofit community makerspace, volunteering and helping people build things with open hardware and open source software. And to me, I wanted a better lifestyle if you had late stage Alzheimer's that could be done. Or I had a friend who had breast cancer. How do we detect this faster? And so one of the things I started when I started playing around with Python, to me, it was just another language, other than the fact that it was really readable. But then I learned the ecosystem of all the packages that were out there, NumPy, SciPy, Napari, all of these amazing things that were very niche in some ways, but very important in different scientific domains. And I think one of the keynotes I think I did about 8 years ago was very few really hard problems in the world will be solved by code, one human, or one domain. They're going to be systems and cross domains. And I think it's imperative as core Python, the language that is the foundation that many of these projects run on, for us to be good stewards, both as core Python and also good consumers of Python from the scientific Python ecosystem. And the only way that I feel we can do that is building a strong web where we're working together. And like we said before, everybody doesn't have to know everything, but the ecosystem needs to be thoughtful. It needs to basically, like Jonathan did, challenge me on the where does data science fall, because I could say different things, but being open to having that collaborative debate and not making it personal. So I know I went totally sideways on you, but that's what I think.
But you pulled out the kind of the crux of the conversation, and I absolutely appreciate it. And I think you also did fit the brief of what past, present, or future. You're definitely giving what future success looks like, and I absolutely appreciate that approach. Cool. Yeah. Jonathan, we've been talking about
Yes.
Wheel Next. You can mention that project and
Actually,
or others.
I would like Mike to start by FastC Python because I'll
Okay,
read
I know
down.
you're going with
Yeah.
this. Okay. So background
Yeah.
and actually, I don't want to take credit for this because I didn't start any of this and put any of this in motion. But when I was at Microsoft working on the faster C Python project to make the core Python interpreter faster, one of the things we did was realized that the core space for core C Python development had too many other things going on, that it would be too hard to be in that space, having all our discussions with everybody else there and everybody having an opinion, great opinions, all of them, but like sometimes you just have to kind of move forward with a smaller group. And so I don't know whose decision it was, maybe Brant knows, but the decision was to like make our own GitHub organization and kind of work over there, still working in public, still allowing anybody to come up and present ideas, but it wasn't full of all of the large noise of working in a much larger C Python community. And I think that served us really well. And what we would do is kind of run all these experiments, try a bunch of things, and then the things that felt like they were bound to have impact in core Python, where everyone else is going to need to read in on that, that's where we would surface it back. And that segues to Jonathan. This was just a discussion we had last year at PyCon that sort of got this all going.
Yeah, actually, the panel was started by the conversation Mike and I were having. So when I started to try to get people together to work on packaging, namely around scientific computing packages and accelerated type of packages. We were trying to find a model, and we tried DPO, discourse.python.org, and well, for anyone who's been there, it's difficult. So for the least we can say. And maybe Carol has a few ideas of why this could be changed and how, but essentially I was trying to look around on how people approach doing significant changes in the open source and nurturing this idea and allowing them to grow without getting all the stop energy and the difficult philosophical challenges that you get from the beginning, even before you start working. And I was looking around, and then I got very, very impressed with what the FastC Python team has been doing. And essentially, I took the blueprints that Mike and every others have done in FastC Python, and was like, I'm gonna shamelessly copy the whole thing and modify a few things to adjust it for the Python community, for the packaging community. And that's pretty much how we created We Are Next, as a sort of a faster C Python community targeted to packaging and solving packaging issues. And as Mike was saying, the biggest thing is I see it as an accelerator of ideas that allows you to get with people that essentially will try to motivate you and to feed ideas into the pipeline and allow you to grow them, build prototypes, and see how we can. We have NumPy maintainers, we have PyTorch maintainers. I think we have 8 or 10 companies right now that joined. It's open to everybody. It's on GitHub, available to everybody. Everything is open source. It's just on a space that let ideas to grow before somebody shut them down.
Yeah, I just want to echo, I view the faster C Python initiative or the Wheel Next or even the upcoming Rust and C Python, this model of these sort of incubations, right? Where people are working on these projects that need, people focused on them with, dedicated expertise, but not even expertise. So I actually was a faster C Python contributor, not working at Microsoft. And I think the reason that model is so successful is because it's actually kind of the reason why Python is so great, is that it's just so open. There were many people from outside of Microsoft working on that. There were cross-functional meetings with people at Meta and people at ARM and other people who were interested in performance and trying to, mind meld and figure out how all these pieces like free threading and the JIT and other optimizations were going to come together. And I think that knowledge share and synthesization, the synthesis of these ideas to audiences that maybe weren't so focused on performance or maybe aren't so focused on packaging but still could appreciate the value of the work that's going on, I think is what makes that model so cool. Speaking as an individual human and not a steering council member, I would love to see that model more formalized in CPython. This sort of incubations program, other programming languages like Ruby have their JIT live outside of Ruby proper. I think that model has been working really well for us so far. And I think with, I don't know how fast everything's moving, it might be really beneficial to the project.
If I can just add one quick point to that, I think there's this interesting paradox, right? I deeply believe that working in the open in a way that anybody can just come up and start contributing is extremely powerful, and we've seen so much come out of that. But there's this paradox where in some ways it doesn't scale, and you have to find ways that manage that scale while also keeping the democracy and the other great things about it. And that's hard, but I think the sort of mature learning for me is that purely open is kind of so messy that it's hard to move things forward. But open, but with careful thoughtfulness about how you're doing it is really important.
Oh, I'm going to do a spicy take on that one. So I agree. I mean, let's face it, businesses, government, there are things that are public and not public. I think where I would say is the more be transparent by default. And unless it needs to be a closed door decision or discussion, I won't say necessarily decision, but discussion, it should be transparent. And that's when we started the steering council, that was our default model. And each steering council has refined it over the years, and props to Savannah and the current steering council and Hugo and Emma for starting core dispatch and really getting more information out faster to ecosystems. And it matters. And it's not a one-shot thing. But I would hate to see some really amazing PhD, postdoc, whatever, have some great ideas, and because they weren't sitting in a corporate environment, be excluded from participating in those discussions. And I think that so far that has been the case, that people have been welcome to participate. But this is a strange world, and who knows where the world will be. So I think we need to be intentional about it.
That's a great comment. It's actually exactly what I was thinking in terms of the history of how things. A lot of my experience is older now, right? And I'm not as current on the current. But what I am seeing, there's a lot more corporate involvement in Python than there was way back. It was only the PhD student who had, more time than money, right? That could spend the effort and get engaging. And now the risk is, are you going to miss it because you weren't employed by the right company, right? Now, I think the people here are the key. And then, because most of the time I've seen, like everyone on this stage, most people I meet in the Python community, they're pushing back against any kind of, corporate pressure they may be receiving. But I think that's an important battle, right? Ensuring that we want the corporate sponsorship. We need the money. We need people to be employed doing this full time. In fact, we need people employed doing facilitation full time. Like, if the one thing I've seen is most needed in some of these conversations is somebody who's just thinking about that. And they exist out there in the world. They're facilitators. They're developer advocates. We need so much of that in every of these communities. Just make sure, great, hey, company X, sponsor developer advocacy role, so this person could go around searching for the PhD students. In fact, I'm kind of surprised that's not done already. Like, what a great recruiting tool that would be. Like, you take the whole recruiting budget of most of these companies and just focus it here, and you'd have, and that could be a source of your next hires, is you're going out and making sure those conversations are happening. Because I totally agree with the need to make it welcoming, because it is hard. It's hard to be on the outside and go, wait, how do I contribute here when I don't know what's going on? Yeah. And it needs intentional facilitation.
And if you want to do part two, or for the question and you already answered it, so just want to maybe, if you want to put a bow on it, what things have you seen work well, and if you want to anchor it to projects if you want.
Yeah, I've done a lot of this work, especially early in my career, and if people want to talk later, I can go into immense detail about the specifics of writing NumPy and engaging in NumPy with the people, which includes sitting down with Guido and Paul and talking about, hey, do we put NumPy, bring numeric into Python? Oh, maybe that's not such a good idea. Okay, let's bring the buffer protocol in, and becoming a core maintainer because I did a PEP, and going back and forth on what that should be. And then having my opinions historically realize, that was a dumb opinion. I was kind of the Python D type and how that worked. So I have numerous examples when I should have listened more, and examples where just engaging with others in the community actually led to the better outcome.
One other thing that I think was really successful is a lot of the work around free threading, not just the technical contributions, but even if you think about folks like Nathan and Lisandros, who have spent a tremendous amount of time evangelizing the work, Hugo working on websites to showcase all the wheels that have free threading support. I don't want to undervalue those types of contributions, because half the battle of adoption is just getting people to try it out and telling their friends that thing is cool and it works for their use case. And if it doesn't, telling us that it doesn't work, right? So I think there's that. There's also the internal kind of mind melding I mentioned earlier that happened between in some of the performance meetings with Meta, as we were thinking about how to bring the JIT and free threading together. So I think again, I feel like we've said this a million times, but communication and bringing people into the fold, and not undervaluing maybe the non-code contributions of these types of initiatives.
Absolutely.
And since we're talking about the things that work, I'd like to be a contrarian. Let's talk about the things that don't work.
Next question.
Yeah, exactly. So the next person I'll pass the mic is Carol, but I think we need to have an open heart-to-heart conversation about discourse. Yeah. It's pretty terrible. I don't think anyone will tell you that they enjoy spending time there. Conversations are leading to burnouts. They are leading to people deciding to step away. We have a lot of people, if you tell them discourse, they're not interested anymore. They don't even want to engage. And it's a problem, right? Because you have maintainers who are key stakeholders of some decisions, and they categorically refuse to even step into the conversation because discourse is so broken. I think Carol was mentioning that maybe if we were to add threads to conversations, so having a platform that allows you to essentially not have a linear structure, but like a tree-like structure. And I think the idea actually was from Pradyun, but the current model doesn't work. And I'd like to see the Python community find a different home for open source discussion. I think discourse is fundamentally broken. Part of the decision maybe for FastSC Python was recognizing that discourse was broken. Every time we tried as We Are Next, we decided to secede and go on a different platform because that was fundamentally non-functioning. And I don't have a better idea. I don't know these tools enough to know, oh, we should do X instead of DPO. But I know that the one we're having is fundamentally broken. And maybe if there is no tools that suits the Python community, we have thousands of talented developers. Let's build something.
So one of the things that I want to underscore, some of the things that we've said that was worked and kind of the inspiring conversations, because that is the emphasis of today, is to equip everyone in this audience and everyone who watches this with the tools and the investment to build in this area and moving forward. We talked about ambassadors. We talked about developer relations. We talked about tool interoperability. We talked about DPO. We talked about incubator programs. And we talked about bringing in a human element and also making sure it's recognized what the impact of all of this work is as well. So I absolutely appreciate that. This is going to be the last question, and we can have one question from the audience. So kind of think of it, and whoever feels obliged can talk about it.
Say one call
Yeah.
to action.
Do it.
On that topic.
Yeah.
So I think having been a steering council member and read lots and lots of PEPs, which take a long time to go through, and then lots of discussions on discuss.python.org, the volume is immense. And I'm a volunteer and I have a life and other things, and I tend to be very organized and good with my time. This year, or at the end of last year, I started writing something that would basically pull down from discourse all of the things on a thread, because when I would look at the thread, I come back to it a week later and it would be like, oh, the recommended estimated reading time is 3 hours. Sorry, but I'd rather go to the beach and check out the creatures in the tide pool for at least one of those 3 hours. And so I think it no longer serves us. And I think the PEP process is such a key part of the future and where we're going and giving people a roadmap. So whether it's getting rid of discuss.python.org or throwing some of these AI tools, depending on how you feel about AI, at that to do regular summaries or, like we would do with a list of issues or whatever. I think we need to reduce the burden and reduce the toil. And, I don't know what the solution is, but I know that by surfacing that it is a problem, that's the first step to making it better. And I think we can, and we will, but it's going to take time. And bless everybody for reading PEPs, responding to PEPs, participating in the conversation. It's important. So, sorry.
No, perfect, because that is the last question is if you can distill in maybe one short line so we can have, if you're interested in asking one question, try to make your way to the microphone for the interest of time. If you could give one line of what you'd like someone to take away from this panel, what would you say, Mike?
This is fundamentally an extremely open community, and anybody with a good idea can get it done. it's super complicated in practice. And I think if you struggle with it, find some person willing to mentor you, help you find your way through this maze. And, it can be done. And it's still, I think, very like exciting in that way. There's no, ultimate like no that's ever going to happen. Anything is still possible. It's just the reality of large groups of people are always complex, and there's a way through.
What about you, Jonathan?
I have, depending on the audience, I have two. One I think is niche out. It's a good thing to nerd yourself into something. Find your passion, and most likely in a couple months you'll be the most knowledgeable person about that niche because you'll manage to niche yourself sufficiently deep into it. It's kind of like PhDs essentially. So find that niche, exploit it to your advantage. You'll find jobs with it. Companies have the same problem. It's a good thing. Try, especially with LLMs that are now really, really good at general thing, become an expert about that little, stupidly little thing. Okay. And for the steering council, please start a discussion about replacing discourse.
Okay. Savannah?
You don't need to be on the steering council. Started a thread on that. Anyone can start a thread on that, and we can talk about it. Or you can come meet the steering council in our office hours and tell us how bad it is and how much you want it to change. We have we have office hours like every other week, which are open to anyone. So come talk to us. No, I think my like closing thought is like a mantra that I use a lot in my life, which is just like do it scared. Like if you sat here today and you listened to like a lot of us talk about a bunch of things that sound cool and maybe overwhelming, and like we're talking about these enormous projects and initiatives, and you think maybe I have a good idea. Tell us, do it scared. It's not scary. We all started somewhere. You probably have really good ideas that we haven't considered, so please share them.
Pretty simple. Love the suggestions. I'm after you overwhelmed. I forgot mine because yours are so good. Do it. Be patient. I think that's the thing. Things take longer than you expect, especially in a world where we have instant gratification and things should immediately happen. Success could be 3 years from now. Be patient.
I've not seen, this is the last chance to get a quick question out. If you have one, we have about 3 minutes to answer, so maybe one of the audience members or the panelists can answer the question.
Hello, my name is...
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm so sorry.
No. Let's take the question. You
Thanks,
can
Carol.
hear my words in the hallway track.
Hi, my name is Talmo Pereira. I am an assistant professor and the director for AI and research computing at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies. We
San Diego.
San Diego, yep. My lab does a lot of work in developing scientific tooling built on a lot of the platforms mentioned here today. We have open source software that's in use by 50,000 researchers in 90 countries. I want to signal boost and echo and beg you guys to get rid of DPO. Please support WheelNext. Our team alone has spent over $5 million of your taxpayer-funded money from the National Institutes of Health, helping biomedical scientists deal with environment, the package dependency conflicts, getting CUDA installed. These are people who do neurosurgery and do not understand how to open a terminal. I beg you, please make it easier to install GPU-based dependencies, GUI-based dependencies, and things that can run on Windows. A lot of us do not have a choice. We have to run things on Windows, and WSL is not an option.
I'm hoping to see you on the bi-weekly meeting now.
And that is my closing statement as well.
Okay, all right.
Thank you guys.
San
I just wanna
Diegans
say, look,
rock.
the work that you're doing, this topic has a lot of significance. It costs taxpayer dollars, and it saves lives to cut down the hours to install these packages. Thank you guys.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And we'll get, I think we have time for one more and maybe a 30-second response.
Why do you think there has never been a non-core developer elected to the steering council, and what do you think it'll take to get one?
Oh, gosh. Do we have 30 seconds to answer that? Who wants to take it in 30?
Who are you?
A concerned party.
He was my mentor when I joined Core Python. What would it take? Plugging into the conversation. I feel like before I was a core developer, I kind of looked at core developers and the steering council as this mythical body of people that are so like out of reach, but we're just other weirdos that think Python is cool. I think plugging in and like starting to talk to folks on the team and making yourself known is like step one. Yeah, I don't know. This is a big question.
So I think it comes down to, one, understanding what the steering council does and how it operates, which is sort of the technical reason. The other is, I go back to when I was on the Python Software Foundation board almost a decade ago, I think at this point, and we were talking about bolstering global impact of Python. And how do we do that? How do we accelerate grants so that we can, accommodate the global South? And I think it takes intentional effort, which often takes time, but it starts with the recognition that it's important. Now, I have two stories. One about Fernando Perez. When I think it was 2013, I was a nobody. I attended SciPy, and I sat in this room. I was the only woman, and there were probably 50 other people. And at some point, he turned to me and he said, "What do you think?" And that really left a huge impact on me. And so when you see somebody who might have an opinion, a good idea, whatever, act on it. And then taking a risk. I approached Savannah, I don't know how many PyCons ago, and said, "Hey, would you ever have any interest in being a core developer?" Because I had read her writing, I had seen her work, and the rest is history. She's on the steering council, release manager, super wonderful communicator. I can't say enough good things about her, but I know from Brant being a good mentor and the web of people that we're building, we have the ability to do it. We just need the time and intention to do it.
What a wonderful way to wrap this conversation up. Thank you so much for joining and adding your questions, and you can find us in the hallway track.